Imagine finding an old VHS tape, unlabeled, forgotten among your things. When you watch it, you see yourself, mundane scenes from your day, rehearsing, grabbing coffee, walking down the street. But there's a problem. You don't remember any of it. Small details are wrong. Clothes that aren't yours, familiar places with a strange twist, minor accidents that never happened. For JUNGKOOK, this casual discovery becomes a quiet obsession. The tape feels like a distorted echo of his own life. Confusion gives way to a growing anxiety, the unsettling feeling that the reality around him isn't quite what it seems. He starts searching for answers, digging through the past, the forgotten corners. And what he finds isn't a simple explanation, but something that shakes the very foundations of who he thinks he is. Morning light filtered lazily through the large windows of JUNGKOOK's apartment, painting golden stripes on the polished wooden floor, gently warming the fibers of the plush rug. The air held that rare, dense silence of a day off, a quietness almost palpable, broken only by the distant, constant hum of Seoul traffic, a sound so omnipresent it had become part of the silence itself, and by the soft, comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingering in the kitchen, a promise of calm amidst the usual hustle. For JUNGKOOK, these moments were like small islands of tranquility in an ocean of commitments, a welcome pause in the frantic schedule that defined his life as a member of BTS. It was a day to breathe deep, feel the weight of his own body on the sofa, to be just JUNGKOOK, far from the incandescent stages, the inquisitive cameras, and the weight of global expectations. He decided it was a good day to finally tackle the forgotten corner of his closet, an area that had been silently accumulating boxes and bags for months, perhaps years, becoming a small museum of his own recent history. A mix of old tour costumes that still carried the faint smell of sweat and stage perfume, carefully wrapped fan gifts he'd kept fondly but never found a place to display, obsolete electronic equipment he didn't have the heart to throw away, and simply clutter. Things that once seemed important now just took up space. He put on a soft, chill R&B playlist to play through the built-in speakers, the sound filling the apartment with a gentle melancholy, and began the task. The smell of stored fabric, slightly musty and sweet, mingled with the coffee, creating a strangely domestic fragrance. He emptied a shoebox containing a tangle of charging cables for models he didn't even use anymore. Set aside some promotional t-shirts from past events he knew he'd never wear again, folding them with a resigned sigh. Then, his hands, rummaging in the bottom of a large opaque plastic box, found something unexpected, tucked between promotional album covers still in their intact plastic wrap and an old lapel microphone with a bent clip. It was a VHS tape. He frowned, the movement creating small creases between his eyebrows. A videotape? He could barely remember the last time he'd handled one, let alone used a VCR. The tape itself was heavy, generic, a block of matte black plastic with no label on the spine or the faded front sticker. No title, no date, no clue. Where the hell had that come from? His mind quickly scanned his memories. Maybe from some old rehearsal recording, the kind made carelessly just to review steps. A project from his trainee days? A lost relic from his early years? The box was a veritable portal to the recent past, containing a miscellany of items from different eras, making it impossible to date the tape by association. Curiosity, that familiar itch at the back of his neck, pricked. He was almost certain he still kept an old VCR player somewhere in the depths of a closet, one of those technological relics you keep out of pure nostalgia or the simple inertia of not knowing how to dispose of it. After a few minutes searching in another closet, one he rarely opened, he found it, covered in a thin but stubborn layer of grey dust. He blew off the dust, which dispersed in the beam of light from the window like a tiny ghost, and caught the characteristic smell of plastic and old electronics. He found the right cables with some difficulty. The red, white, and yellow RCA connectors looked so archaic now, almost alien compared to HDMI ports, and connected the player to his modern, thin, flat-screen TV. The contrast was almost comical. The mechanical whir and loud click of the VCR turning on sounded strangely invasive in the apartment's silence, a sound that belonged to another decade. With a slight but audible plastic click, He inserted the tape into the slot. The machine swallowed it with a slow mechanical groan. The TV screen flickered, displaying a shower of blue and white static for a second, accompanied by a low hiss, before a grainy, unstable image took shape. The quality was terrible. The colors washed out like an old photograph left in the sun. The sound muffled, distorted, almost underwater, with a constant hum in the background. But what was on the screen made him hold his breath, his body tensing involuntarily. It was him. Or at least someone so identical the difference was negligible. The camera seemed to be positioned in a fixed corner of a practice room, probably propped up somewhere high. The figure on the screen, him, was practicing choreography with intensity. It wasn't a current routine, but it didn't look old enough to be from his trainee days either. He recognized some isolated movements, fragments of recent routines, but the full sequence seemed slightly reconfigured, out of order. And the clothes, a simple plain black t-shirt and gray sweatpants, he definitely didn't remember owning. They looked comfortable, but they weren't part of his usual wardrobe. The image cut abruptly, a line of noise streaking across the screen, to another scene. Now the figure was sitting in a cafe, face relaxed, laughing at something with someone off camera. The light was soft, coming from a side window. It looked like a genuine, relaxed interaction, a stolen moment between commitments. JUNGKOOK tried to identify the cafe by its decor, but something about the layout, maybe the color of the walls, or a specific painting hanging in the background with an abstract landscape, seemed subtly wrong. The figure on screen brought a paper cup to his lips, and then, in a clumsy, entirely believable motion, spilled a little of the drink, which looked like iced tea, on his shirt. A small, dark, damp spot instantly bloomed on the light gray fabric. The figure winced in annoyance, but with a touch of humor, and grabbed a paper napkin from the table. A perfectly mundane scene, the kind that happens every day and is forgotten the next minute. Another abrupt cut, more visual noise. The figure was now walking through a familiar park at night, under the yellowish light of the lampposts. The city lights glittered in the distance, creating a soft bokeh in the background of the low-resolution image. He was eating an ice cream cone. Suddenly, he stumbled slightly over something unseen on the dark ground, and the ice cream, a scoop of white cream, fell from the cone, landing with a soft thud on the front of his dark jacket. He stopped abruptly, looked down with an expression of pure comical, almost childish frustration. JUNGKOOK leaned back into the soft sofa, feeling the velvety fabric under his fingers, a strange, cold feeling forming in his chest. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was a deep, almost disorienting confusion. When had he recorded this? He searched his recent memories. He didn't remember spilling a drink on himself in that cafe he didn't quite recognize, or did recognize but with the wrong pieces. He didn't remember dropping ice cream like that in the park, nor wearing that specific jacket recently, and the slip during rehearsal. He vividly remembered losing his balance on a similar step during practice the day before, feeling the imbalance for a split second before correcting himself, but not exactly like that, not in that sequence of moves, not with that slightly different recovery. Maybe they were takes from promotional shoots that were never used, deleted scenes from some Bangtan bomb or documentary, or perhaps his memory was simply playing tricks. With their schedule, the days, the irregular sleep patterns, the complex choreographies learned in quick succession, sometimes everything blurred together in his mind like a wet watercolor. It was the most logical explanation, the most comforting one. He had probably done those trivial things and simply forgotten. That had to be it. The mind plays tricks, especially under pressure. He turned off the VCR with the remote, the mechanical hum ceasing abruptly, leaving a silence that seemed even deeper. He ejected the tape, the plastic warm from the machine, holding it in his hand for a moment, pondering, unlabeled, anonymous, unexplained. He decided to leave it on the coffee table for now, an anachronistic object amidst the modern remote controls and design magazines. He returned to his tidying, actively trying to push away the uncomfortable feeling, like swatting at a persistent fly. In the following days, JUNGKOOK's life resumed its relentless pace. Rehearsals that left his muscles sore and his forehead gleaming with sweat, recording sessions in heavily air-conditioned studios smelling of electronic equipment, strategy meetings with the team under fluorescent lights. He tried not to think about the tape, but it remained there, on the coffee table, a small black rectangle that seemed to watch him silently every time he walked through the living room. The familiarity of his routine should have erased the strangeness, but something kept him from completely forgetting. It was like a musical note off-key in a familiar melody. One night, unable to sleep after a long day at the studio, the image of the tape returned to his mind. He got out of bed, walked through the silent, dark apartment, and put the tape into play again. The VCR's hum filled the nighttime quiet. The same grainy scenes, the same poor quality, the same mundane events. The rehearsal, the cafe, the park. This time he watched with almost forensic attention, eyes fixed on the screen, searching for something, anything. He paused the image at the cafe. That painting on the wall, though he was almost absolutely certain that the cafe they sometimes frequented, the one that looked like this one, had a different painting there, something more vibrant, geometric. And the paper cup his other self was using. The printed logo seemed to have a slightly different design, maybe a font or a symbol that wasn't the current one. He paused again on the park scene. In the background, blurry, almost illegible, a bus passed. He squinted, leaning towards the screen. The ad on the side of the bus. It was for a movie or concert he was sure hadn't been released or announced yet. And the model of the bus itself, the curve of the front, the windows, it looked like a slightly older or maybe slightly newer model than the ones currently running on that specific route he knew. Small things, tiny details, almost insignificant in isolation, things that could easily be explained away by the low resolution, by recent trivial changes to the locations he hadn't noticed, or simply by his overactive, tired imagination, searching for patterns where none existed. But the consistency of the discrepancies began to erode his certainty, to truly bother him, like a pebble in his shoe. The most disturbing thing, the one that really kept him in a state of low-level anxiety, was that the events on the tape weren't happening to him in the present. He didn't spill coffee on himself in the following days. He didn't drop ice cream in the park that week, even though he'd walked through it. At the next rehearsal, he executed the choreography perfectly, without that specific slip captured on the tape. The tape didn't seem to predict anything, didn't seem to be a warning. It seemed instead to document a parallel reality, slightly misaligned, an almost twin universe, but with small irritating differences. Why would he remember messing up a step, but not spilling coffee or dropping ice cream? They were equally trivial incidents. The logic didn't add up. The initial confusion started to give way to a subtler but persistent anxiety, a fluctuating sense of disorientation. He began to feel as if he were watching a very realistic movie about his own life, but with a script slightly altered by a careless director. Who was that on the tape? Was it really him in moments his memory had capriciously blocked for some unknown reason, or was it something else? He tried mentioning the tape casually to Jimin during a rehearsal break, while they were stretching on the mirrored floor. "Hyung, you know that old VHS tape I found at home?" he began, trying to sound nonchalant. "It had some scenes of me doing kind of weird stuff, like messing up steps I don't remember messing up like that, in places that look familiar but aren't exactly the same." He almost added about the coffee and the park, but stopped himself. It would sound even more bizarre. Jimin laughed, a genuine warm laugh that contrasted with the chill JUNGKOOK felt inside. "VHS? Seriously, Kook, that's prehistoric. Must be some super old recording from our trainee days you don't even remember." Wow, the stuff we used to do back then, all the mistakes. Maybe it's just that. Jimin gave his shoulder a friendly pat. "Don't worry about it. You're probably just tired." "No, it doesn't seem that old. The quality's bad, but the clothes, the places..." JUNGKOOK started, but his voice trailed off. How could he explain the minor decor differences, the ad on the bus, the visceral feeling of unreality, without sounding completely paranoid or like he was losing his mind? He ended up shrugging, forcing a smile. "Yeah, maybe that's it. Just thought it was weird." Jimin's response, though full of good intentions and genuine concern in his eyes, only reinforced JUNGKOOK's sense of isolation. No one would understand. They'd probably say he was overworked, needed a vacation. This was something he had to figure out on his own. The tape became his silent, disturbing secret. The obsession, once an uncomfortable curiosity, began to take hold. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He needed concrete proof, something that could validate or refute his suspicions once and for all. Armed with his modern high-resolution cell phone, he began systematically revisiting the locations he thought he recognized from the tape, transforming into a detective of his own reality. He went to the cafe, sat at a table near the window, ordered an iced tea, and discreetly took several photos of the interior with his phone. Later, at home, he compared the sharp photos with the grainy image paused on the TV. Yes, without a shadow of a doubt. The painting on the wall was different. An urban black and white photograph now occupied the space of the abstract landscape from the tape. The color of the chairs was a moss green, not the beige seen in the recording. Minor renovations, perhaps? But when? He didn't remember them. The smell of the cafe, a mix of roasted beans and cleaning products, seemed exactly the same, but the visual was subtly, undeniably altered. He went to the park at night, the cold air stinging his face. He stood near the exact spot where the other him had dropped the ice cream, under the yellowish, flickering light of a lamppost. He watched the buses passing on the nearby avenue. None carried that strange ad. They displayed promotions for current K-dramas and electronics brands. The street lighting seemed to have a slightly more orange hue than the yellowish white on the tape. The sound of the wind rustling through the leafless trees seemed for an instant to have a different, more melancholic melody. Or was that just his imagination? He visited the practice room where the first scene had been recorded, outside of training hours, when it was empty and silent. He examined every corner, every wall, the ceiling. He ran his hands over the cold linoleum floor, searching for marks, holes, anything that might indicate where a camera could have been fixed to get that specific, slightly elevated angle. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The room looked exactly as it always did, functional and impersonal. He briefly considered other possibilities. An obsessed stalker using ancient technology, implausible and technically difficult. A very elaborate prank by the other members. They liked pulling pranks, but this seemed too complex, and the content was so pointless. It didn't make sense. Each comparison, each small confirmed difference, heightened the sense of vertigo of unreality. His reality, once solid ground beneath his feet, now felt unstable, like walking on thin ice. The tape showed an almost identical version of his life, yet subtly wrong, like a reflection in a distorted mirror. The terror wasn't sharp or violent. It was a slow, steady erosion of his certainty about the world and himself, of his own identity, anchored in the time and space he knew. He increasingly felt like an echo, a slightly delayed copy of something more real, more present. His own skin sometimes felt like it didn't quite belong to him. His reflection in the studio mirror, sweaty after hours of dancing, looked distant, the eyes a little empty. Was that how the other him looked on the tape? The frustration was immense, almost physical, a lump in his throat. Where had the damn tape come from? Why did it show those specific, mundane scenes? Was it some kind of distorted warning? A message? The questions spun in his mind like a runaway carousel, unanswered, leaving him exhausted, irritable, and tense. He decided the only possible answer had to lie in the tape's physical origin, in the box where he'd found it. There had to be something else there, some tiny clue he'd missed in his first search. He went back to the box, which was still in the corner of the room, semi-organized. This time he emptied it completely, methodically, spreading the contents out on the bedroom floor over an old sheet. Old clothes, crumpled papers, useless cables, a pair of headphones with one side broken. Nothing seemed out of place. Discouraged, he knelt and started putting things back, when his fingers, feeling the bottom of the rigid plastic box, brushed against something hard, cold, and smooth, almost hidden under a loose fold of the fabric liner. He carefully pulled the object out. It was a smartphone. He immediately knew it wasn't his. The model was familiar, similar to the latest releases from major brands, but the design was slightly different. Thinner, perhaps, with more angular edges. The color was a matte black he didn't recognize from any model he'd seen up close. It felt cool and dense in his hand. It was off, the screen dark like a small black mirror, reflecting his own anxious face. He turned it over in his hands. No obvious manufacturer's mark on the back, just a minimalist stylized symbol he didn't recognize. His heart started beating faster, a dull drum against his ribs. A phone, inside that old box along with forgotten junk? How? Next to it, wrapped with a small rubber band, was a charging cable. The tip was USB-C, which was normal, but the cable itself seemed made of a different material. Maybe more durable, and the plug that went into the wall was a bit more compact. He tried plugging it into his wall charger. It fit perfectly. He left the phone on the nightstand, plugged in and waited. His breath almost held, watching the dark screen as if expecting it to reveal all the secrets of the universe. The anxiety was almost unbearable. It took a few minutes that felt like hours, but then the dark screen suddenly came to life. A simple, elegant, and completely unfamiliar boot-up animation appeared and vanished in seconds, giving way to the lock screen. It displayed the date and time in clear modern digits. It was exactly the current date and time, but the background image made him freeze, the blood seeming to turn cold in his veins. It was a recent photo, taken backstage at an international awards show that had happened just a few days ago. It showed all 7 BTS members smiling, arms around each other, clearly celebrating. A great photo, spontaneous, full of energy. A photo he was absolutely certain he had never seen before. He was in it, of course, but his hair was slightly different, maybe a fresher cut, and he was wearing a leather jacket he didn't own. With trembling hands almost dropping the device, he swiped his finger across the screen. To his surprise and growing dread, the phone unlocked instantly. No password, no PIN, no facial recognition. It was on the home screen. The interface was familiar. It looked Android-based, perhaps a customized version, but the app icons were sleeker, some apps he didn't recognize at all. There was a messaging app with a different green logo, a browser with a stylized compass icon. His instinct, a mix of fear and a desperate need to understand, guided him. He opened the photo and video gallery, and there it was. JUNGKOOK's stomach lurched. Short videos, but in high definition, 4K maybe. The quality was perfect, the colors vibrant, the sound crisp and immersive. The first showed the rehearsal in the familiar room. The image was steady, probably recorded by another member. He could hear everyone's panting breath, the exact squeak of sneakers on the linoleum floor. And there was the slip, looking exactly as it did on the VHS tape, but now clear, unmistakable, every tense muscle visible before the quick recovery. The second video was in the cafe. The camera seemed to be held by someone sitting across from him, maybe Taehyung or Jimin. The laughter was clear, contagious, the cafe's ambient sound sharp, background conversations, the clinking of cups. And the moment he spilled the drink on his shirt was there in all its embarrassing detail, followed by laughter from the person filming. The third video was in the park, at night. The image was steady, likely recorded in selfie mode by the JUNGKOOK in the video. The stumble, the vanilla ice cream falling onto the black jacket, all recorded in high quality with unrelenting clarity. The VHS tape. It was just a copy. A terribly degraded copy, almost a ghost of the vivid present content on this phone. A chill ran down his spine, raising the hairs on his arms. But how? Whose phone was this? With his heart pounding, he opened an app he recognized as a popular social media platform, one he also used frequently. The app asked for a login, but there was an option to view as guest or something similar. He clicked it. The public feed loaded. Recent posts from public figures, news, and then posts from the other members, his own bandmates. RM had posted a photo of a book he was reading, commenting on the productive meeting they had that morning. J-Hope shared a short clip from today's rehearsal, humorously mentioning how he almost took a bad slip on that specific step. Sugar posted a picture of the coffee cup they had after the meeting today, complaining about the traffic. The events he had first seen on the grainy tape and now in crystal-clear videos on this unknown phone. They weren't from the forgotten past. They weren't a bizarre premonition. They were happening. They were happening today, but not to him, not in his timeline. They were happening to the JUNGKOOK of this phone, to the other RM, J-Hope, Suga. With hesitant fingers, he opened the pre-installed news app on the phone. The main headlines were from today, yes, but they reported an international political agreement being signed, something he knew was still under negotiation. They mentioned a breakthrough in artificial intelligence that sounded like it came straight out of a science fiction movie. They announced the surprise album drop of a Western artist he admired, an album he thought wasn't due out until next month. Everything was slightly ahead, as if he were reading tomorrow's news or next week's. The realization hit him like a physical blow, knocking the air out of his lungs. The floor seemed to disappear beneath his feet. It wasn't his memory failing. It wasn't a cruel prank or a conspiracy. They weren't old recordings or premonitions. The tape, and more importantly the phone, weren't from his past. They were from the present, but not his present. They were artifacts from another reality, a reality almost identical to his, mirrored in nearly every detail, but running on a slightly advanced timeline, a few days, weeks, months, impossible to say. The JUNGKOOK from the tape, the owner of this phone, was the JUNGKOOK of that other timeline. The real JUNGKOOK, the present JUNGKOOK. And he was the JUNGKOOK from the past, living in a soul that was a slightly lagging shadow of that other one, a stage waiting for the main play to begin. This phone, somehow inexplicably, inconceivably, must have gotten lost. Fallen through some invisible crack between realities, perhaps during a moment of quantum overlap, a cosmic stumble nobody noticed, and ended up in that old, forgotten box in his apartment. And he, at some point in the subsequent confusion, or driven by an unexplained impulse he now couldn't recall at all, might have instinctively made that crude VHS copy of the found phone's contents, a format his mind associated with old recordings, before repressing or simply forgetting the entire incident and the phone itself. JUNGKOOK let the phone slip from his hands onto the soft bedroom rug. The device landed with a muffled thud. He leaned his head against the cool wall beside the bed, closing his eyes tightly, trying to process the unthinkable. The silence of the apartment now seemed oppressive, heavy with cosmic implications. The distant hum of the city outside sounded like a far-off echo from another place, another time. The terror he felt had no name, no shape. It wasn't the fear of a ghost or a physical threat he could fight. It was the pure, nauseating vertigo of discovering his own existence was, perhaps, secondary, a carbon copy, a dress rehearsal, a rough draft of a story already being lived, in high definition and in real time, by another him on a slightly brighter stage, one crucial step ahead in the flow of time. His hard-won achievements, his internal struggles, his most cherished and defining memories, they were all undeniably real to him, felt in his flesh and bone, but now they seemed tainted by this terrible revelation. Were they original moments or just inevitable repetitions of an already written and executed script? His individuality, something he cherished, suddenly felt fragile, questionable. He looked at the VHS tape still lying on the coffee table in the living room, then at the phone lying on the bedroom floor, its screen dark again now, but still pulsing with unknown potential. There were no answers there, no explanation for how or why parallel universes could exist and interact in such a casual, accidental way. Only the cold, brutal realization of his position in this strange, vast cosmic scheme. What now? The question echoed in his empty mind. Try to contact the other JUNGKOOK? How? Through that alien phone. And what would he say? Hi, it's you, but from the past. Try to deliberately alter the course of his own life, make different decisions, fail where the other succeeded, succeed where the other failed, just to force a deviation, to prove his own agency, to become original, or just continue. Live day by day with the weight of this impossible knowledge, knowing that perhaps he was just an echo in the mirror of time, a shadow chasing a present it could never reach. He stood up mechanically and walked to the wide living room window. He looked out at the nightscape of Seoul stretching below, a sea of glittering lights against the darkness, the familiar buildings, the illuminated bridges over the Han River, the constant flow of red and white headlights on the avenues. It was his city, his home. But now he saw it with different eyes, through an invisible filter of estrangement. It seemed a little older, a little less vibrant than the mental image he held of it, almost like an elaborate stage set, waiting to catch up to its brighter version. the version that existed on that phone and in that other timeline. He was alone, more alone than he had ever been, even in moments of greatest pressure or the isolation of fame. He was utterly alone with a knowledge that broke him from the inside, that subtly separated him from the very fabric of his reality. The fear wouldn't leave anytime soon. He felt it in his bones. It had become part of him, a constant existential chill that would accompany him with every future step, every note sung under the spotlights, every furtive glance in the mirror, silently, inevitably wondering if he was living or just echoing. The real terror, he realized with desolate clarity, lay not in the VHS tape or the mysterious phone, but in the staggering fragility of identity and the vast, unknown, indifferent expanse of time that surrounded and defined him, or perhaps didn't define him anymore. Did you enjoy the story? Subscribe, hit the like button, and comment what you thought. Pick a link on the screen for more stories.